A coup plot looms over Moscow. General Armageddon, Sergei Surovikin, returns as a knife behind Putin's back. A coup plot is enveloping Moscow. Sergei Surovikin, the General Armageddon, is returning like a knife behind Putin's back. As Russia's economy suffocates under sanctions, banks drowning in debt, and the military's morale fracturing, every glance within the Kremlin is tinged with fear. As the double earthquake of economic and political crisis arrives, how will Surovikin seize the moment? The coup plot in the shadows. Can Surovikin overthrow Putin? The threat of a coup is simmering right in the heart of Russia, and the central figure is one no one expected, General Sergei Surovikin, who is gradually returning to prominence in shadowy discussions among the military elite. Once the hero of Syria, commander-in-chief in Ukraine, then vanishing after the Wagner uprising, Surovikin is not just a disgraced general. He is a symbol of the deep fractures within Vladimir Putin's power structure. When Wagner marched on Moscow in June 2023, the world saw Prigozhin, but the name that truly terrified the Kremlin was Surovikin. Multiple sources, including opposition billionaire Mikhail Khodorkovsky, assert that it was Surovikin who had the capability to mobilize disgruntled generals and coordinate military logistics for Wagner. Prigozhin was merely the spearhead of action, while Surovikin was the strategic pivot. When he appeared in a video calling on Wagner to stand down, Western analysts understood this was not loyalty, but an attempt at self-preservation. Just days later, he vanished completely. Rumors about being placed under house arrest, interrogated, or even detained only made the image of General Armageddon more obscure and more dangerous in Putin's eyes. After the Wagner affair, the Kremlin launched an unprecedented purge campaign. Dozens of generals were demoted, transferred abroad, or administratively disappeared. The goal was not just retaliation, but preventing another Surovikin from rising. However, the tighter Putin squeezes, the more he creates a vortex of suspicion and fear internally. When the military loses faith and the elite panics in the face of economic crisis, the psychology of a chain reaction within the ranks of power becomes uncontrollable. Russian inflation is surging. High interest rates are paralyzing production. The banking system is drowning in bad debts from pouring money into the defense industry. New sanctions under President Donald Trump are strangling oil and gas revenues, the Kremlin's lifeline. Meanwhile, Russian state television, which has always maintained strict control, has for the first time publicly admitted the economy is collapsing, a rare sign of political panic. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte warned, Ukrainians have struck over a third of Russia's oil and gas infrastructure. Their economy is fracturing, and Putin will be forced to change his calculations. Surovikin is currently isolated, stripped of rank, stripped of networks, but he still possesses one most precious thing: prestige within the military. In Russia, where every regime has collapsed from within the armed forces, from Tsarist times to the Soviet Union, military prestige is the spark that ignites coups. If economic and political crises combine into a double earthquake, Surovikin or a similar figure could very well become the rallying flag for the discontented faction, not because of ideology, but because of survival instinct. Russia on the brink of collapse, from war debts to screams at the Kremlin gates. While Vladimir Putin continues to paint a picture of a resilient and self-reliant Russia, the reality inside the country tells the opposite story. The war machine he erected has become a ticking financial time bomb, and it's exploding right in the heart of Moscow. $446 billion buried within Russian banks, disguised under economic growth reports. In reality, these are debts used to produce missiles, bribe officials, and maintain the illusion of control. Every explosion in Ukraine adds to Moscow's debt, and now that illusion is disintegrating. For the first time in years, voices of protest are ringing out right before the Kremlin. A video from Moscow captured a woman shouting loudly before the presidential compound gates, "We're sick of watching them stuff their rooms with money while we starve." A crowd of retirees applauded, and the police, who previously would readily arrest anyone, now just stood still, hesitant. The motivation behind this protest is not political, but hunger. But that's precisely what frightens Putin most, when people are no longer afraid. In St. Petersburg, musicians were imprisoned for singing anti-war songs, but their videos spread across Telegram in just hours. From there, waves of protest spread across the country. When the economy collapses, obedience collapses with it. Behind every ruble printed is an absent soldier. In Yakutia, troop shortages have reached 40%. Villages are emptying, schools are void of children, and funerals have become a familiar sight. Coffins return from Ukraine faster than wages reach people's hands. The Kremlin can still arrest a singer, but cannot imprison numbers. Off-budget war debts nearly equal total defense spending. The actual deficit is 3 times the published figure. Every missile fired is a loan that will never be repaid. Every glide bomb is interest compounding toward collapse. Russia's war machine operates on debt, denial, and propaganda. But time is not on Putin's side. Mothers and retirees now stand confronting guards before the Kremlin. The loyal are beginning to accuse the very judges and officials who once served the regime. The vertical power structure is collapsing into a horizontal network of blame. The fracture doesn't come only from civilians. Even Gennady Zyuganov, leader of the Communist Party, once the loyal opposition, has had to speak out. He warned that 20% interest rates will take Russia to a dead end, and the fact that potato prices have quadrupled is a disgrace. In a country once proud of its endurance, potatoes have now become a symbol of collapse. Even if the war ended tomorrow, Russia cannot escape the financial bomb they themselves detonated. When defense contracts disappear, contractors will go bankrupt, banks will fail, and the ruble will die once again. Putin cannot stop spending without admitting defeat. But if he continues borrowing, he'll push the country into deeper crisis. Western sanctions, rather than being meaningless as Putin claims, are becoming pressure valves gradually suffocating the economy. Each month, the $446 billion debt swells, and Moscow's negotiating power weakens. When Russian officials begin begging for sanction relief, it's not a sign of peace, but of desperation. The world is witnessing something rare, a superpower self-destructing from within. The protests reflect not just anger, but the financial statement of a regime going bankrupt. That's when the screams before the Kremlin gates become the echo of unpaid bills. Moscow in flames. Russia's skies no longer belong to Putin. That night, Moscow didn't sleep. The capital's sky lit up with explosions and smoke, not from Putin's super-nuclear missile displays, but from a series of lightning Ukrainian Yuan UAV strikes. Just hours after the Kremlin boasted about the Burevestnik missile with unlimited range, impossible to intercept, Kiev's cheap drones had penetrated Russian air defenses, paralyzing airports, sirens wailing throughout the city, and soldiers erecting machine guns around the Kremlin walls for self-defense. While Russian television touted the nuclear miracle, a missile flying continuously for 15 hours, international observers only saw skepticism. All previous Burevestnik tests failed after just seconds. Nuclear engines wouldn't start. Warheads fell immediately after launch. If there truly was a nuclear missile operating for 15 hours straight, the Arctic sky would be saturated with radiation, but not a single monitoring station recorded any traces. Putin wanted to prove strength, but reality proved weakness. Russia no longer controls its own skies. Images of Russian soldiers guarding the Kremlin through the night, flashing lights continuously across the capital's sky, are evidence of panic within military ranks. Satellite maps show that most of Russia's most modern air defense systems, from S-300, S-400 to Pantsir S-1, have all been pulled back to surround Moscow, creating a steel ring protecting the Kremlin. But the remaining 132 million Russians, from Belgorod to Yekaterinburg, are virtually abandoned. When every shield is concentrated to protect one person, the rest of the country becomes prey for Ukrainian UAVs. Just a few dozen kilometers from Moscow, the city of Serpukhov erupted in flames on the night of October 27th when Ukrainian drones attacked a fuel depot. Russian air defense missed, and a missile struck a residential building instead. Meanwhile, the Russian Ministry of Defense hastily evacuated its entire fighter fleet of Su-35s, Su-34s, MiG-29s, and even strategic bombers Tu-160 and Tu-95 billion-dollar symbols, fearing total loss like in previous strikes on Engels and Pskov. Moscow understands they cannot fire a multi-million-dollar S-400 missile to bring down a drone costing just a few $1,000s. As a result, Russia accepts being hit to save costs, while Ukraine fully exploits the advantage of cheap, accurate, flexible technology. Each time a UAV slips through radar systems, each plume of black smoke rising from fuel depots is another slap to the military superpower image Putin has tried to maintain for over 2 decades. In a year-end press conference in 2024, when asked, "Before you invaded Ukraine, no one attacked Russia. Now Russians aren't safe even in Moscow. How do you call that protection?" Putin only remained silent and continued blaming the West. But that question became a symbol of the collapse of the inviolability myth. Since early 2025, Moscow has continuously endured unprecedented attacks. Hundreds of Ukrainian UAVs fly into Russian airspace each month, many heading straight for the capital. Vnukovo, Domodedovo, and Sheremetyevo airports repeatedly suspend operations. Aviation is in chaos. Residents are panicking. The Kremlin's claims of shooting down all become increasingly ridiculous as evidence of fires and explosions spreads across social media. The steel-solid air defense system Putin once took pride in is now penetrated by UAV needles. The air war has reversed roles. The one who once rained terror from the skies now tastes destruction from their own weapon. British intelligence speaks out. The Kremlin is disintegrating from within. In the intelligence world, silence often carries deeper meaning than any words. But when Richard Moore, head of Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, speaks out, it means something has exceeded limits. In July 2025, he declared briefly but hauntingly, Putin is losing control of his country. This is not a prediction, but a warning, not just for Russia, but for the entire world. Because when an empire of fear begins to collapse, no one can know which direction it will fall. According to MI6, Russia now no longer operates like a normal country, but resembles a body being attacked by its own panic. Every Kremlin decision is a convulsion, every passing day is a step closer to collapse. Russia is no longer governed by law or reason, but by fear, which was once Putin's tool of power. For over 2 decades, this fear silenced people, made officials submit, made even the world cautious. But now even fear is turning against its master. Moore describes, the Kremlin is like a system eating itself alive. Power agencies operate disconnectedly, suspicious of each other. The military acts uncoordinated, intelligence doesn't trust the government, and the government has lost the ability to control reality. Putin built power based on fear, but he forgot that fear is also fire. If not controlled, it will consume the very one who lit it. MI6 assesses, within Russia, panic comes not from the West but from within. Inside the FSB, the notorious security agency, mutual suspicion is escalating. In the military, dissatisfaction with the Kremlin grows deeper. And in society, silence no longer means submission, but exhaustion. Moore compares today's Russia to the late 1980s Soviet Union. Everyone knows the system is rotten, but still pretends it works. The only difference, this time the collapse will come faster, because there is no more faith. 7 signs of Kremlin collapse according to MI6 include 1. Cracks in the elite. The power circles in Moscow are divided into factions, those wanting to stop the war, those wanting escalation to maintain power, and a third faction, those just seeking escape. They are no longer loyal, only afraid. And as Moore says, fear is the worst form of loyalty. 2. Information chaos. MI6 doesn't just listen through satellites, but through Russia's noise, millions of conversations, signals, and military commands. From this, a picture emerges. Subordinates are exhausted, superiors are panicked. The higher up in power, the greater the anxiety. 3. The war of lies against itself. Propaganda, once a tool of control, now turns to destroy its own master. Lies have spread throughout the system to the point where no one knows what's real anymore. MI6 calls this the mirror effect, when a state becomes so obsessed with looking at its own reflection that it no longer recognizes its true face. 4. Waves of betrayal and leaks. In the past 6 months, British intelligence has recorded at least 20 information leaks from the Russian military and government. Some sell data to survive, some just want to speak the truth. MI6 assesses, when people start talking, it means fear no longer works. 5. Panic in governance. Kremlin departments act independently, contradicting each other. The military receives conflicting orders. FSB and Ministry of Defense blame each other, while oligarchs seek exits. This is not a state, but a mechanism spinning without knowing the power has been cut, Moore says. 6. Truth becomes a weapon. MI6 rarely makes information public, but when they speak, it means truth has become a strategic tool. Every leak from the Kremlin is a crack in the armor of power, and when there are too many cracks, no propaganda can repair them. 7. The rise of local power centers. Governors, generals, and territories are beginning to act independently, what Putin fears most. The power system is fragmenting into autonomous pieces, each carrying its own danger. According to MI6, inside the Kremlin there is no more trust, only mutual surveillance. FSB monitors the military monitors officials, officials monitor each other, and everyone fears becoming the first traitor. Moore calls this a closed circle of fear. Once fear has no target, it turns back to attack its own master. The military doesn't believe in victory, FSB doesn't believe in order, and the Kremlin doesn't believe in the future. Every decision made is not to achieve results, but to avoid accountability. A country no longer living for victory, but only living to justify failure. According to MI6, Putin now lives in a world of staged reports. Every report sent to him is distorted by 3 layers of filtering: censorship, self-censorship, and fear. No one dares tell the truth, fearing loss of favor. Because of this, Putin is no longer president. He is a hostage of information he himself created. Moore describes the Kremlin as a nuclear reactor without a cooling system. It still operates, but any fluctuation can lead to an explosion. It's not the West or Ukraine causing Russia's collapse, but Russia destroying itself. This system doesn't know how to exist without an enemy, so it begins searching for enemies within itself. The purges of generals, arrests of officials, internal witch hunts, all are no longer power struggles, but a war to find meaning for existence. Empires don't collapse because of failure, Moore says. They collapse when they no longer understand why they must win. MI6 believes Russia has passed the point of no return. This is no longer power, but a ritual of power. People within the system still act, but no one believes those actions still have meaning. The Kremlin is now a self-locking cage where every guard fears their own reflection. And that is the final tragedy of an empire that ruled by fear. When fear no longer points outward, it turns inward and corrodes everything from within. Ladies and gentlemen, when MI6 is compelled to speak out, the world understands that the inevitable has begun. Does Putin still have enough time to realize that his own war has harmed him?